Man, these tents are cool. They're so simple. Cool. Hold on. Is this what I think it is? Their architecture? Let's talk about it. Really simple architecture, but it's not as simple as you think it is. First off, let's talk about their context here. They always gravitated towards these oases that are green, that probably the only areas in Barren that actually receives rainfall. So what does that mean? They're not in a hot aired environment. They're in hot, moist environment. So there's moisture, but it's really hot. Although I don't agree with this tent being like, so there's no ventilation, nothing, it's gonna get really damp in there, but they do have a solution. I'm not sure if this is intentional or not intentional, but look at this. They have like a small chimney happening. So these guys are not as sophisticated as the torrents or orcs or even quillbear boar, right? Maybe perhaps they lack the strength to do what the other guys do, but their structure is so light, even lighter than torrents. Can you believe that? But it's far more primitive. It's like, look at these posts, for example. They're much more lighter, right? This fabric seems far more lighter, right? And when I say it's primitive, it's simple, it's non-sophisticated, but they have some level of function, right? So they can't add a window, but they have this opening here, intentionally or non-intentionally, which can act like a chimney. So what does that mean? So they're generating heat inside. There's no fires inside, and because they keep it outside, so that's not an issue. But people do generate heat. So and when it does get hot, it allows this to when hot air rises. So it would have been better to have an opening there. Again, not sure if this was done intentionally, non-intentionally, but it does work. There's another reason why I mentioned they live next to this area. That means that they probably get a lot of rain, and that's why they have a pitch. They get a lot of rain. They're not able to have that opening the way Quillbear has it or Torrents have it, because those races do not have to worry about the rain, but these guys do. So what's the solution? You close it off and have a layered roof where this allows the heat to escape, but water to not come in. That's genius. That is fantastic. I mean, again, not as sophisticated, not as strong, but they made something work. It definitely gets a damp in there. Why? There's no opening. This is not good enough for cross ventilation. Man, every time I talk, the more you talk, the more you learn, right? So if you think about this, again, I'm not sure if this was a mistake. If it was a mistake, if it was a genius mistake, but the fact that this is lifted up, this side actually creates the negative pressure. So wind hitting this side, creating positive pressure, and no wind hitting on this side because the wind is coming from that end is creating a negative pressure here. So does that mean the wind actually, the perfect aerodynamic? I mean, that works again because the wind is coming through. The cross ventilation actually helps release the heat and it cools off the building. Now I'm thinking more about it is, could this be that these guys are actually orienting their buildings towards this area for a reason? And that reason being is that's where the wind is coming from, one, but the wind is also coming through a cooler area. So there's a lake here. Looking at this map, right, you have a lake here. These are facing this way. So let's say the wind is coming from here, the hot air comes and goes through this oasis area, like green area, cool area. That air actually cools down, and as it cools down, it actually enters through here, cooling the hut and then taking the heat with it, keeping the structure really cool. Wow. Speaking in terms of architecture in WoW, these guys are genius. We're working with such an unsophisticated architecture, yet it has so much elegance to it. There's so much function to it. This is foam follows function, guys. Removes any need for any unnecessary elements to this. Man, interrupting my review, please stop. I'm admiring your architecture and you guys want to attack me. Really? Okay. Okay. Anyways, your architecture is fantastic. Great job. But rude. The only issue here is that they're using a dark fabric. It's absorbing a lot of sun, making this really, really hot. Not the best. I mean, they do have some white in there. I think that's good. It reflects some of the sunlight off. Great job. I think overall, very simple. I do want to check out this big structure because it's different than the rest. And this perhaps is part of the hierarchy. So there is perhaps more to it than just function, right? There is a level of hierarchy. It's not, so this is more protected. Nonetheless, I mean, it's a little bit different. It doesn't have that opening we spoke about, but this one has something even a little bit different. These spikes that they have on top, this one has holes. Okay, so it still acts, it still protects against rain. I don't think it's as protected as that. And then they perhaps made these holes, or it was wear and tear. It releases the heat. But this is a little bit different, and I think this has to do with more of a hierarchy. Like this one definitely screams importance compared to these. I'm curious to see how that looks. Now this, in my opinion, is probably a true barren structure. Like I don't think it gets better than this. When I say barren structure, I'm talking about one that sits at the boundary of the dry and the moist, right? Lush and the barren. Why do I say that, right? It has very large overhangs to protect against any downpour. It still has that same concept of layered roof, which allows it to escape a lot of heat. It's open to all four sides, so no humidity is actually being trapped, especially being close to the water and having a lot of down rain. It is risen above just in case there's flood. The water is coming down here and it would puddle up here, and being this at a higher elevation, or it being elevated, protects the main platform or the ground floor or the first floor from that flood. So this one probably is a structure that sits at the borderline of two different environments. I think this is probably the best responding architecture that we have seen so far. It is definitely more sophisticated than the other architecture we have seen in this location. Like this is just a tent, very similar to the concept, but this one, perhaps this one has a higher importance than the other structure just because it's elevated. That's the symbolism behind this, but it's much more protected against downpour. It still follows the same architectural functional concept.